Right, we're just going to get all the engineers out of the bar, which is where you always go to find them, and we'll kick off in just a second. Yay! I like that enthusiasm. This is fantastic. That's what I want. Hello, everyone. How are you? Budjarigamaru, which is hello in local language. I think it's important. We go to school and we're taught French and Italian and German and everything else. We don't always learn our local language, and I think it's quite important that we do pick up a little bit along the way. So hello to you, Budjarigamaru. So I do want to kick off by acknowledging the traditional owners of this land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. It's where we meet. It's a beautiful part of this country in what is an extraordinary nation, and we're very lucky to share it with them. So I do want to acknowledge them, pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and any Indigenous people visiting from country today. Great to have you here. My name is Simon Thompson. I'm the editor of StartupDaily.net. Because that doesn't keep me busy enough, I also host a daily show of the same name on AusBiz, talking startups, talking to investors, talking to founders, everyone, 2 p.m. every day. If you're a little bit busy building your startup, that's fine. You can watch it on catch up on ausbiz.com.au. And then just because I still didn't have enough to do, I've now launched a weekly podcast. It's out again tomorrow morning. That is called Suds. It is basically picking the eyes out of the show, because each week I talk to about 24 founders, investors and others in tech. And we thought, this is really good shit. So, we just decided to pick out 5 of the best each week, talk about those and get some quotes out of that. So have a listen. It takes about 20 minutes of your time, whatever else you're doing. I kind of listen to myself at the gym sometimes. Although what I love listening to at the gym, because I have to actually exercise for a little bit longer, is Welcome to Day One, Adam Spencer's podcast, which he launched. Massive, ambitious project. It's really great. If you get a chance, have a listen to it, because it's got some great founders and many others in the Australian ecosystem. Well, here we are. We're going to talk about funding for early stage startups today. I know plenty of people are interested in that. Yesterday we had a focus on talent, hiring, achieving, partnering, all of those sorts of things. Great conversation. I know we're going to have that online to watch on Catch Up too, if you didn't get a chance to be part of it. Great to see some familiar faces again, 2 nights in a row. But yes, you will be able to check that out. I'm going to hand over to Kathy McGuinness in a second from Microsoft for Startups. And as she makes her way up here, I do want to say a big thanks to our partnership with Microsoft on this. When we talked about it, it was about how can we do something for the ecosystem that makes everyone a little bit better, a little bit smarter, and hustle a little bit faster. So this is the result. So thank you to the team at Microsoft and Microsoft for Startups for this. Thanks also to our other community partners, BDO, Perello, Ingram Micro, Legal Vision and Azure, and especially thanks to Tankstream Labs, the spot where we meet today. All right, I'm going to get out of the way because we're going to have a chat in a minute with Georgie. Over to you, Kath. Give her a hand. Come on.
Hi, everyone. I think congratulations are probably in order for getting here. It's a big effort to have gotten out this evening, so congratulations. In the AFR today, a spokeswoman for CBA said that less than 20% of their staff had shown up for work today due to the heavy rain, and that they had postponed incentives such as free snacks and meditation until next week. So they do have to watch how they spend their $16 billion revenue, but there's no postponing here, so please go bananas on the snacks and feel free to meditate in your seats as the night goes on. So yes, it is my job at Microsoft for Startups to take care of all the startups across APAC in our program, and also the startups that are not in our program. So talk to myself, Justin, or Sunil, who's going to give us a little bit more information about what Founders Hub is. That's our new product and platform that makes it super easy to get started on your startup journey or keep going on it. So we have had a little bit of shuffling of guests this evening. It turns out that having 2 of the 7 biblical plagues does hamper a schedule. And unfortunately, Richard Lim from Airtree is unable to make this evening. No doubt we'll get him back for another round soon. And Sam Riley will fly the Answerada flag for Joel White. But we have Georgie Turner, principal investor from Tidal VC. We'll be having a fireside chat straight up with Simon about when and how to raise properly. Next, 5 things you need to know how to nail your fundraise. There are only 5, and these are they. And Sam Riley from Ansarada is going to tell you them. And then a panel on secrets to raise, founder lessons on preparing, prospecting, and pitching with success. And for that, we have Cheryl Mack, CEO of Aussie Angels, Jethro Cohen, who is an investor at SquarePeg, and Isabella Rich, principal at OAF. And then, as I said, Sunil is going to, in a quick-fire, rapid wrap-up, just take us through what you can expect from Founders Hub. Thank you, Tank Stream Labs, again for having us. Thanks to our partners, Parello, BDO, Ingram Micro, Legal Vision, and Assured. That all sounds like a really boring rap to say, like, these people partnering with us, but they are here to give you a bunch of stuff that's going to help you as well. So make sure that you find them. Since you've made it here and since they've made it here, you may as well connect, see what they've got on offer for you. And with that, I'll hand over to Simon and Georgie.
Thank you, Kathy. I do want to point out that the conversation a little later, it was a typo. It's actually 500 things you need to know about your fundraise. And we will be going till about 10 tonight. But let's get cracking on this. We're going to have a chat. We'll throw it open to questions from the floor. And hello to everyone watching online. Great to have you tuning in too. Hope you're safe and dry wherever you are around Australia and the world. But we will take questions from you too. So if you've got them, throw them in. Georgie, welcome. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, you're kind of new kid on the block when it comes to VC. Tell us the Tidal story.
Yeah, I guess, 3 years is a little bit new, but we actually created Tidal to serve founders at the seed phase. So we are a professional institutional venture capital fund, but we wanted to build like a slightly different product for founders from some of the larger funds, I guess, that you see getting around the traps now that have been around for a fair bit longer than us. We thought the seed phase is really the phase that is the most difficult, but also the most exciting. And so we all kind of came together, the 4 of us, wanting to start something that was a specialist product for seed stage founders and really target founders at that phase that they go through where they're trying to get to product market fit, go to market fit, hire a really good team, and get themselves ready for what I would call like later stage like growth scaling capital, which is Series A post. So we kind of funded the whole idea around let's go and create something specialist, and then but also create a product that enables people to take capital from the same investor over time. So we have follow-on funds that also follow on to our best seed phase companies. So that's really how it started. I mean, we saw a massive dearth in available seed capital when we first started it 3
Valley
years
of
ago.
Death, as it's known.
Yeah, it was. But it's funny because now everyone thinks seed's cool and is whacking seed on everything. So I think we started a trend.
You planted a seed.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what about sectors? Are you agnostic, or is it just all BNPLs? You know, how are you interested in sort of the types of companies?
So funny you say that. There's a lot of them, and there's a lot of spins on it as well. And not
it's like the Uber for BNPLs.
Yeah. We are actually. So it's funny. People kind of expect me to say we do health or we do fintech or whatever. I would say that we're agnostic when it comes to like the vertical or the market that you're selling into. Like we don't really care what that is. What we are specifically focused on is we really like B2B models, and we really, really like products that can be built in a way that they enable product-led growth or product-led sales. So they're inherently lend themselves to a user archetype that you can find within an organization. And I think what that means is that sometimes we don't invest as much in things like healthcare because it just doesn't lend itself to that thesis that we have around how you should build a product from the ground up. But it's not that we don't, it's not that we sort of exclude that necessarily. If you look at our portfolio, we have done a lot of e-commerce infrastructure. So we've done, Ship It, Carted. We've done a bit of fintech. We invested in Frankie One out of the first fund. But there's a bit of a variety there. We like SaaS tools. We really, really get product-led sales for SaaS tools. but we've done a little bit in agriculture tech. I just invested earlier this year in a agriculture tech software company for cannabis growers. So a little bit, there's a couple of different markets there that we play in, but generally it has to be a product-led founder, a product-led company.
And who knew 3 years ago that something like logistics would be such a popular commerce brand in the next 2 years?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is about how and when. I'm going to start with this first because 3 years ago when Total came along, yes, there was an absolute dearth of seed and early stage investment. We've started to fix that. We've also seen a broadening in terms of access to capital and how you can access it. So there is options now like venture debt. The crowdsourced funding thing has kicked in. So why venture? If I'm a founder and I've got my brilliant idea and I've worked really hard on it, why do I let you into my cap table and give you a share of my business?
Sure. So the first answer to that is that I probably spend more time telling founders not to raise venture capital than I do trying to convince them to raise venture capital. It's really not for every business. If your business is one where you have a lot of competition coming up behind you and your competition are raising venture capital, unfortunately you're going to need to raise venture capital. If you want to compete in a market like that, you need to be able to hire the best talent, you need to be able to throw the same amount of money at marketing, you need to be able to enter markets at the same rate. So if it is a competitive market, then you do need quite a lot of capital to get a step ahead of your competition that are coming up next to you or behind you. Venture capital makes sense if there's just a big white space in the market. So there's a lot of businesses that you look at and you're like, the product's built, you kind of know how to take it to market, it's just a land grab. So to do something like that, generally raising, a couple of $100 million wouldn't go too astray if you want to take that market. So there's a few scenarios where I would say your only choice is to raise venture capital. Then there are situations where you can afford to maybe operate at a slower pace. So maybe you're not aiming for a huge target market segment. You want to build a really good product for a niche segment, and maybe you don't have as much competition behind you, or maybe you're the perfect founder to build that product and you know more about it than anyone else in the market. And so you just want to build a really, really great, fully featured product for a smaller niche market segment. In that situation, I'd say probably more like revenue-based financing would make a lot of sense because you can keep your dilution to a minimum. You can focus on charging your customers because your product is awesome, so you can actually make some money, which is a traditional way to build a business.
Didn't realise.
Yeah. It's actually, there's fewer cases where VC funding makes sense than, cases where it doesn't make sense, if I'm honest.
Well, there's the check as part of the whole process, but what about what else a VC brings to the table in terms of building a business? Because often there are some serial founders who are going around the next time, but they've already probably got that relationship with previous investors. When you're doing it for the first time, there's a lot to learn. Yeah.
This is funny, we were talking about property before. This is kind of like hiring a buyer's agent to buy your property. So you're probably going to buy like one property in your lifetime, maybe two, if you're lucky to buy property at all. You kind of want someone who does it all the time because there's a lot of repeatable stuff that goes into building a company, particularly building a software company. And to have someone around the table who, it's not only that they've done it once before, because a lot of people will say, oh, you could talk to other founders, but VCs are doing it in real time. And to give you an idea, like I've got a portfolio right now of 30 companies that are all doing exactly what each other are doing at the same time. So they all have the same questions, they all have the same requirements around how do I get my product into the US? How do I start my company in the US? Who do I hire as my first growth hire? How do I iterate from subscription pricing towards usage-based pricing? Is that the right model for my company? How do I do user testing? How do I know if I have product market fit? All of these questions are, every company is different, but there are replicable playbooks that you can apply across all of these businesses. And so to have someone who is not just advising you, but who has skin in the game to help with that is actually really can be quite a game changer at the seed phase. I think it probably becomes less and less important as the company gets bigger to have VCs around the table. But in those early days where you're trying to unlock early growth, I do think that not just having an advisor, but having someone with skin in the game to actually help remove some of the blockers, it's been game changing for our startups. Now, the only other thing I would say is that don't discount the benefit of having a VC brand on your cap table if the VC does have a brand, just because everything that my founders are telling me is that developers look at that, staff will look at that and say, where's my pipeline of the salary that I want? And the salaries are getting pretty jacked up at the moment. So like talent are looking at that and saying, does this guy have like someone who's going to keep funding the business? Does this girl have, the backing behind her to validate this business even though it's pre-product? It definitely speaks volumes if you want to move quickly.
Who knew we'd be recalculating burn rates based around the cost of engineers nowadays?
Oh my gosh, it's so high.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you turn people away. That's a big part of what you do. Just paint a picture of the title experience in the day. Talking to a lot of VCs, they probably see 1,000 deals coming across their bench a year. What do you guys like? And take us a little bit behind the scenes in terms of the triage. Let's call it that. Mm-hmm. But the filtering process.
Yeah, sure. So the first thing to say is that we did a review of our investments last year, and pretty much I think it was like 80% of what we invested in came through internal network. So like it was one of the partners knew the person who had sent it to us. There was one situation where our associate outbounded into a company, and like, to be honest, that's pretty much it. So generally you're being sent stuff from people that you know, and that's the stuff that gets most of a look in. Now, I'm trying to change that at the moment because I don't find it to be very inclusive at all. Everything that comes through top of funnel gets screened on the basis of some principles that we have around what we like to invest in. So there are certain things that ESVC LP funds can't invest in. We can't do biotech, for example. There's only a small portion of the fund that can be allocated to international headcos. So if you're already flipping your company to the US, then you're going to be in trouble if you're trying to get money from Australian investors. So there's a few things like that there are just straight up and down we have to exclude because it's just not going to fit in the fund. We often take first meetings if we're interested in the product regardless, because there's often an avenue or a path to investment at some stage, whether it's a later fund or sometimes we just like the look at the product and we just want to talk to the founder about it because it's cool. So we do sometimes take meetings like that. But generally, we're looking at it and saying, does it fit the title principles? We have a whole set of principles we're actually really clear on. I think the best thing we can do for founders is be really clear on what we like. And I try to always in the first call be really clear about what we like. And I will actually turn down on the first call if it looks like it isn't what we like. Because I just think that if you're raising money, sometimes you do have to go through quite a few investors before you can kind of find one that hits on your business and just really, really loves it. So I try to be pretty fast, like within 2 weeks, you'll kind of know if it's progressing for us. I think I actually did a podcast or presentation the other day where I sort of said we preferred no pitch deck, and we operate our whole business in Notion. So like we're actually titles entire, like everything is in Notion. All our investment papers are in Notion. My deal flow CRM is in Notion, and so I actually love it. Rather than getting a pitch deck, I actually love getting like a public Notion page with like a Q&A on the business that has a Loom demo or some other platform, whatever platform you use, embedded in the Notion page, because we actually will ask to see a product demo before we take a meeting. And that's just because we're a product-centric VC. We care a lot about the founder demonstrating the capability to build really beautiful, interesting product before we even start talking about the macro and the long-term vision and all of that stuff that VCs like to talk about. I would say it's a fairly clear-cut process from our side. I like to hope it's the same for others.
We talked about sort of the product fit a little bit earlier. I think that idea between customer and company is an important one, but it also applies for your venture partner.
Yeah.
You've addressed it there and around sort of the companies that you will look at or won't. How do founders approach that particular aspect? I think there has to be a little bit of due diligence on their part in terms of who they approach if they don't want to waste their time, and the VCs.
Yeah, look at the investment notes that the VC releases. So most venture capital funds will publish their investment notes. Ours are really clear. Like if you go on the Tidal blog, you'll be able to see what we've written about each company that we've invested in. And there's actually 5 key principles that we look for across that. So you should be able to go through and look at that and match your own business to it, or, you know, exclude yourself on that basis. And I would say if you're going to any VC, you could, I mean, most of them have their portfolio companies on their website. Most of them publish investment notes. You can kind of figure out if you can find a specific partner who maybe has an interest in a company like yours. Maybe they've invested in a similar vertical in the past, and so they're a specialist in that area, and you can try and target them on that basis. When I raise money for my portfolio, like if one of my startups comes to me and we do a lot of pre-seed, so I actually have gone through and raised a lot of seed rounds myself, for my, like, helping my founders raise their seed round. We might lead the seed round, and then we might have, like, you know, $1 million or $2 million left over, and we want to go out and find the best people to bring onto the cap table. And we usually actually just we have a full hit list internally on who we would prioritize. So strategic people who have a particular interest in that thematic, people in a particular, you know, Southeast Asian, they're entering the Southeast Asian market, we want a Southeast Asian investor on there. The one thing I don't think a lot of founders do is almost do like their fantasy cap table. Like you kind of, like, you'd be surprised if you went and said, like, I really want, like, Jack Dorsey on my cap table. Like, you could probably go through and construct something that looks really interesting, because a cap table is kind of like a representation of who believes in your business, and so you have to, like, taking money from just anyone doesn't really bolster your story, is what I would say.
It depends what stage you're at.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
All right, I want to ask you about the mistake side. I was, you know, talking to Phil Moyle from Main Sequence, and he, of course, they only invest in deep tech companies. It's very specific, very narrow focus. And of course, part of what he's trying to do is educate scientists who certainly, you know, probably had a university life. It's their first time going into entrepreneurialism. And he was just explaining a couple of the mistakes that, you know, they can make along the way. What do you see? Because I'm sure there are patterns in terms of things that you shouldn't be doing, but these founders often do.
Yeah, it's really hard because, like I said before, like, you might only, you know, it's the first time for most people raising money. No one has any idea. I mean, when I first raised money for my fund, I had no idea. Super, super hard. The thing I would say that comes up a lot that is actually surprisingly an easy fix is that I think some founders think they treat raising money like they are trying to close a deal or like close a customer, or I used the example of buying a property. So they try to put like time pressure on the investor.
They go a little bit Gold Coast real estate agent on them.
Yeah, like I've had, you know, situations before where you'll have a great conversation, really interesting product, like super interesting. You're so keen to dive in. And then the founder would say, right, okay, we want to wrap this up in 2 weeks' time. So what's your process? And, oh, you're asking me all these extra questions. I don't have time to go through this. I'm getting a term sheet next week. So are you in or are you out? And you kind of like, you know, my job is to invest other people's money, and I have a process I need to go through, and we're professional investors. So that might take 2 weeks for some companies. That might take 8 weeks for another company. So you're not really doing yourself any favors, I think, by trying to put time pressure. Like, the best VCs will move as quickly as possible to put a term sheet on the table. But don't try to like create deal tension is what I would say, because it looks bad. Just be authentic and be humble. A lot of founders don't realize that VC investors are used to like stage gating investing. So like if you're a pre-seed company, you don't have to pretend like you're a post-seed company. You can say what you don't know and what you're planning to use the capital to find out. So it's rare if I have a pre-seed company come to me and they say they know exactly how they're going to go to market. I'm usually like, you don't know that yet. Like, don't tell me you know. Tell me what you think you know and what you're going to test using this money to figure out the best path to market.
Well, there's a whole bunch of things I want to continue asking, but I reckon you guys have probably got some questions. So I do want to throw it open to the floor and see if anyone wants to ask Georgie anything.
Thank you very much. Are you able to share what your 5 key principal investment decisions are?
Yeah, sure. So they're on our website. But number 1, founders that hustle. An example of a founder that doesn't hustle is one that I have to chase to get some information on their company. So you want to hustle people. And an example of a founder that does hustle is one that finds, and this is happening to me right now, finds an excuse to send me a text every day about something that's happening in his company, like exciting things. That's a founder that hustles. We have products that change the game. Products that change the game are ones that genuinely move the needle for their customers. So a product should create immense value for the customer. It should be 10 times better than the alternative. We call that currency. So the currency of the product should be something usually we love, ones that maximize revenue for the customer because customers love to buy products that do that, or maybe it's reducing costs or saving time. But the best ones, a lot of AI/ML startups, for example, their currency is insights. But insights aren't really that exciting unless you can provide some actionability off the back of it. So we look for that link. We look for markets with tailwinds. I've always tried to prioritize these of what's the most important, but they're all just really important to us. So markets with tailwinds, like we zoom right out and we go macro. Why now? Like, why did no one build this 5 years ago? Both from a macro perspective, but also from a tech perspective, because a lot of the greatest technology companies that have been built in the last 10 years, happened because all of a sudden everyone had a mobile, and there should be usually a reason why growth is being unlocked because of the technology. And then we look for a scalable, repeatable path to market. That's a kind of a boring one, and we should come up with a different name for that. But basically, can you sell this in a repeatable, scalable way? Like it should. The point of unit economics is that your company is going to lose a lot of money to begin with, but it doesn't, like on a unit economic basis for every single customer that you acquire, we can see the margins are super high. And if you can just figure out a way to sell to those customers without having to incrementally scale up like a sales team, for example, then you could create leverage in your business model over a period of time. And we've all seen what that looks like at scale for SaaS companies. So it's, we're always looking for the potential for that. And the potential for that usually comes from often some interesting pricing. So like we're often looking for variable pricing that can eventually come of it, or like if you're capturing like gross market value, for example, being able to clip that over time. A lot of founders have to start with free. They have to start with subscription. That's totally fine. But eventually we like to see that moving towards some sort of variable component on the pricing. Is that 5?
Yeah, that was 5.
Oh, good. Okay.
Thank you so much.
I was like, what's the 5th one?
I think the unit economics is kind of getting to the top of the wave, because if you can get there and get on the crest as it breaks, that's when you really take off. Yeah. More questions?
Thanks a lot, Georgie. What are the red flags that might turn you away either from perhaps a great idea or a founder?
Yeah. So, like, we get a lot of solo founders. I actually think a founding team is usually better. We don't have any hard rules around this, so I'm reluctant to kind of make it a thing. But if you have a solo founder, like it has to be a specific type of person who can do that and do it well. It's fine if you can bring on like a great 2IC, then that might be enough. But we might make that like the first thing that we do post-investment. So it's usually a red flag if you've got a solo founder who has maybe they're deficient in some area. Like the best founding teams have like someone who can code, someone who's like big picture thinking around product, and someone who has a bit of commercial wares. We'd probably sacrifice on that third one a bit more because you can usually sub in like a decent growth person. Often if you have commercially minded founders, you can sub in people around that. But like it's rare to have all three of those things in one person. Like if you are like amazing, but like it's just they're different types of brains in my view. So ideally you have a bench around you. It's a bit of a red flag if you don't. And then likewise if you do have 3 co-founders and they spend the whole meeting talking all over each other, that's the other one that sign of misalignment. So team is so important. Team and culture. What you're doing is like building your ability to attract people to what you do, whether it's investors or people, is usually the thing that unlocks stuff. Like it's not the founder that does it. It's all these amazing people that they hire. Especially now in Australia, we've got people coming out of these startups that have gone from, like 0 to like 500 people. And you just have these people who have had this experience like just in the last 3 years, and they love startups. So you bring them on and they'll do it again and again and again.
We've got time for just one more. AJ, I think you've got one from our online viewers.
Bernard would like to ask, if you're building a SaaS company that's starting with 3 users, are VCs interested, or is that more planning?
Yeah, we're interested. Yeah, we just invested in a company that had built the early version of their product. They hadn't released it yet. They had a wait list of 4,000 users, and we invested. They got a proper seed round away for that product. It was a great product. They need to launch the product, and we will find out just how well it's taken off. But I think particularly, probably not if there's not a use case that the investor can extrapolate towards and be like, oh, this is just like this. So if you can build, a lot of community traction around users, I actually think that's harder than monetizing customers. So a lot of VCs will take that risk that you'll figure out how to monetize.
And just finally, Georgie, where do you stand on the ABC, ABR, always be raising?
Oh my God, I hate always be raising. I like all of my founders, I hate it when we're coming up for a raise because it's such a distraction from what you're trying to do. In order to build a business that doesn't make money yet, you need to raise money so that you can build and hire people. So it's a must, but it's not a skill set that is something that's natural to a lot of people, and it's hugely time draining. So yeah, I dislike that. I think raise a lot of money, enough that you give yourself at least 2 years. Like raise enough for 2 years. You can do a lot in 2 years. You can't do a lot in 12 months.
Oh, we got one more, AJ? Okay, sure. Yeah, quick.
Theodore on the live stream, he wants to ask, how do you know what type of funding you're seeking based on the size of your company? There appears to be no standard metric of this. Some VCs don't operate along a large funding curve.
How much you should raise? Is that the question?
So it's questions around valuations. We'll probably dig a little bit deeper into that with our panel later on. But, we see things like StartMate and Antler, that they have a standard formula now. So your company starts at roughly $1 to $1.2 million in that initial pre-seed round, for a fixed amount of capital. I mean, is that a fair metric?
Yeah. I mean, that's the starting point. I would say the thing that's probably, it's a bit of a hard question to answer because it's changing so much and so rapidly on like a quarter-on-quarter basis. But you need to just think about where is your business up to? What do you need to raise to get to the next series of outcomes that you can unlock that will unlock the next amount of funding, and then work backwards from how much you need to raise, and then so that might be 500K for your business, it might be 5 million for your seed business. Work backwards from that, and then just apply what you're willing to give up on dilution. So some founders are like, for the right VC, I will dilute myself 10%. Some of them are like, for the right VC, I'll dilute 20%. You just need to figure out what you're comfortable with, and that's evaluation.
And I think your advice around 2 years is spot on. I mean, we've seen an example this week of a company that raised $100 million, managed to burn through it in 12 months. So, doesn't necessarily
Yeah,
go to
and
plan.
like we should release stats. I think that is it Cut Through Ventures. They're releasing some stats.
Yeah, the numbers.
Look at real numbers. Don't look at what's on the front page of the AFR, because that's like the one company that did that ridiculous round like last year is not the every company.
Yeah.
So yeah.
They're actually what I call how big's your dick.
Yeah,
because
totally.
really that's the exercise at that
Yeah,
point in time. It doesn't tell you a lot about where they're actually going next.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, not a lot. Yeah.
Anyway, on that sort of slightly rude note, sorry about that, because you've been brilliant. Please put your hands together and thank Georgia Turner from Tidal.
And Georgie was nearly ready to answer that curly question about the ABC, which was extremely generous. That's good. Yeah. Thank you so much, Georgie, for your extremely articulate time and brain and thoughts. Now, I'd like to welcome Sam Riley from Ansarada. Just as Sam is going to come up, I'm just going to quickly note that Ansarada is actually now built into the Founders Hub platform, so it's on offer for everyone in the Microsoft for Startups program. So, and they're a first. They're a sort of world first third-party vendor, so exploding the mold already. And with that, I'll hand over to you to tell us all about what we need to know about raising.
Thank you. Oh, the slide's cool. I thought the slot after lunch would be tough, but 5 o'clock's probably worse. How's everyone's day been? Huh? Wait, okay. Yeah, look, we are part of the Microsoft Startup program where we give our software for free to startups, just to help you with a range of things like raising capital and, you know, if you've got a board or something you want to set up on the way, you can use that for free as well. But, you know, it's all about just helping companies get going and get some momentum, and we want to grow up with you, and that's us. So I've got quite a unique perspective on capital raising because we build software for capital raising. People like Georgie have been our customers at her previous jobs and things like that, in bankers, lawyers, accountants. So we've profiled the people who advise you on raising capital. We try to build products for VCs and private equity, but also for companies, for founders, and we've raised capital a few times ourselves. So I'm just going to share my experience, and a lot of what Georgie says is like just I'm repeating some of that, but with a different angle. But I think everyone's situation's different. So what I've put together is more of a philosophy, I think, or things you could think about and do that regardless of your startup or what you're trying to do or what type of capital's right for you and who from, like these are still very valuable ideas. Some of them have cost me $20 million to learn, so you can benefit from my mistake. Here we go. Yeah, so our investment history at Ansarada, my first capital raising advice would be don't do it. If you can. Now, Georgie outlined a very good situation. If it's a sort of first mover takes all market and everyone's piling in and aggressively trying to capture market share because it's like a menu log or car sales or something where one winner takes all, yeah, you probably need to raise capital. But this whole mentality of seed and then, venture seed, A, B, C, D, you don't want to get yourself locked into that mentality straight away. That may end up being exactly what you need. Or there might be different ways you can do things. So we took a different path. We just put in $30,000 between the 4 founders. That's where the name Ansarada comes from. There's Andrew, he's a Russian software engineer, me, Sam, Rachel, she's an accountant, and Daphne's an accountant. So Daphne never did a single thing. She moved to Singapore in the first day we founded. But we had 2 accountants, and you only need 1 in the startup at max. So anyway, that's us. We put in $30,000 and built the business for 3 years. Now, because our software is used for due diligence and mergers and acquisitions and people getting ready to raise capital, the people I went to see to help validate should we even do this business, and if we do, what kind of product do you want, what kind of features, what problems do you have, they were all bankers and lawyers and accountants and CFOs. So inadvertently, it wasn't a deliberate strategy. Well, one, it helped us establish a lot of trust with them to actually use our product and become a customer. So we were able to grow. Our first year was like $500,000 in revenue, then 1.5, and then 3, and then 5 million. But those people who do capital raising and they know about it, they also have a lot of disposable income that a lot of those partners in law firms, accounting firms, investment bankers, they have a portion of money that they like to put into startups. You'd be surprised. Now, because they understood our business and the problem we're solving, I was in the lobby of our old office in the Citigroup building. We're down in the Rocks now, and one of the partners at a law firm said, "When are you guys going to get yourself over to London?" And we said, "Well, we're saving up for that." And he said, "Well, what if I pass the hat around to some mates and we could get you there quicker?" And the next day I had an email with a list of, all these advisory who's who in Sydney, and they all put in 100 grand each, and it was some of them put in 50, some put in 100. It was about 20 of them. And they said, "Yeah, I used to work in London. I was there for 3 years on secondment. I can connect you in there." They gave us 1.4 million, but you might notice it was 2008. It's not the best time to move to London and start doing deals when there's no deals happening. But we sourced our first money, and we didn't do this it says Series A. That's not really honest, because it was just that chance meeting with one of our customers. But I do encourage you could kill two birds with one stone. You could go ask for advice from partners in corporate, in M&A, transaction services, from the accounting firms, from the banks. Just get a coffee with them, tell them your story, tell them what you're thinking of doing. One, they're very well networked. Two, they've seen founders make mistakes raising capital. Three, if they like what you're doing, they may want to fund you. And they'll keep funding you. And as you grow up, they can probably help you with more problems. So that was that. Then we did this, it says Series B, but we thought, we want to IPO in about a year and a half, but we had some major stuff we wanted to change in our platform to make it much more expanded, and we wanted to ramp up some things. So we thought the best structure would be convertible notes, because it wasn't going to be dilutionary, and it was going to be, we could pay the notes back, all good. And then in 2019, we were going to do a roadshow in March, and then COVID hit, and there was no IPOs happening, just completely changed. Now, this is where you want to be careful with investors, because the one thing investors care about, including Georgie was here and everyone, more than anything else, more than you, is their reputation. They will, if push comes to shove and doing the right thing by you or fulfilling something that you need for your business gets in conflict with their reputation, you're going to lose. So for us, we thought our investors would give us another 6 months or 12 months, because who saw COVID coming? We'll pay the notes back later. But actually, not all of them, there's a lot of good people out there, but some of them use that as an opportunity to leverage us and get a much better position on their notes and have extra warrants and all sorts of things. And it ended up heavily diluting us as founders, but we never saw it coming, and it was something we couldn't plan for. But in actual fact, we probably could have handled it differently. But I was shocked that when you needed a hand and just some sympathy, and that some investors will use that as an opportunity to multiply their returns at your expense. So I tell you that scary story because you should really think about who you're getting in a relationship with, because VCs and all these people bury their dead very quietly, you don't really hear about it. And if you can, you should inspect the VC and do your due diligence if you want to go down that road. What are their they'll all put their portfolio companies on their webpage and tell you the success stories. But what are the failures? Who hasn't worked out? Which companies, which founders, and you want to have coffee with those founders if they're not in a mental institution. So because there will be traumatic experiences. But I don't really hear people tell that side. Now, that's not the whole investment community. If you speak to me after, I can tell you who all the good guys are and all that, because I've seen their behaviour for many years, because they're our customers. And there's plenty of good people, and it's much better. So anyway, then we did an IPO, right? So I've got that experience where we raised 20 million in cash, and then the other 25 paid back some of the notes, some of the note holders converted into equity. So that was that. So I've done sort of the founder-funded, angel customer-funded. And I think Georgie said, who's on your cap table says a lot. Well, all of my people that funded that 1.4 million, they were our customers. So that says a lot if you say, hey, our customers love what we're doing so much. They're invested in this. So don't be afraid to approach your customers if it's a B2B product and say, look, if you think it's a good problem to solve, do you want to invest? Because that's a good advocacy for what you're doing. Now, the rest of my prezzo is a lot more boring. Does this work? This is because it's 5 o'clock, the batteries are dead. Right, investors are like judges, right? And I've deliberately, like Georgie said previously, you've got co-founders usually, and there's much more chance you'll be successful if you have a co-founder. So investors are used to looking at opportunities all day, every day, right? And they have a set of criteria that they're watching you, and a lot of my talk is like the things that they're going to judge you on. So you should actually be practicing them and be good at it. Because who thinks those divers would turn up to the World Championships, and not know exactly what they're going to be judged on? They know, and they're ready, and they're trying to nail it, and they're trying to be in sync as co-founder divers. So that's that, right? So I think Georgie said little thing like, co-founders talking over one another. Yeah, that's not that synchronised. So what do they judge? Well, the reason why they judge is they're trying to assess risk. And the entrepreneur's mentality is really more around opportunity, and entrepreneurs are happy to take risk. But investors are kind of like the opposite. First, they want to understand the risks here, and if they're comfortable with that, then they'll hear about the opportunity. But often entrepreneurs don't talk to investors the way they think. They want to understand potential, your vision, clarity. If anyone wants a copy of all this, I'll just send it to you. I don't usually do text slides. It's boring, I know, but it's worth it. They're going to judge you, firstly. Like, who the hell are you? Why are you doing this? What's driving you? What emotions behind it? What are your superpowers? Your vision and the problem. Like, what is the actual problem you're going to solve, and specifically for who? Like, the more detailed and precise you can be on that, the better. How much value is there if you solve this problem? What's the impact you want to make? Like, what's your legacy? 20 years later, you do an awesome job. What's changed in the world? Strategy is then you showing you have clarity on the risks and the challenges that must be solved. Now, a lot of entrepreneurs, when they raise capital, even talk about it. They're very hesitant to talk about the risks involved in this. And it's kind of like all rainbows and butterflies in pitch decks. But if you talk like that, and you can demonstrate some rational thinking around risk, or even demonstrate a previous risk that you had and how you solved it, investors will be a lot more comfortable with you, because they go, they get risk. They also know how to address risk, and they've proven they can solve risk. So don't be shy to talk about the risk. Make it concise, all of that. Your model is then, what are the coherent set of actions that you will do on the funds that you're raising? Like, these funds are going to come in. What exactly are you going to do? And what metrics are they going to address? You know, what are you anticipating to do? And then that's the measures thing. And foundations is all the stuff we can give you, where this thing you can sign up for free has all of the structure. We've done like 30,000 capital raises, so we know exactly what documentation people want, and we've written some content around why this documentation is important, the risks of not having it, the benefits of having it. So that foundational structure, like the agreements you should have, the virtual data room, due diligence kind of structure, we can give you that. Now, you don't need all of that when you're raising capital at the start, but it's sort of a good colour in the lines program. As you get bigger and bigger, like you can just refer to it and go, oh yeah, we should structure things like that. So that's what they're going to assess. So I want you guys, I'm going to click back on that slide, but just on your notepads or your phones or whatever, have a look at that list again and just take a note. Which one are you strongest on? And which one do you think you're the weakest on that you got to improve? And that's something you can do. And I'll give you slides to do it. So which one are you strongest on? And which one do you need to address? All right, I'll move on. It's pretty tricky. Right, I'm going to give you 5 momentum makers. I won't read them all out, but I wrote these because I thought I could give you the slide deck, right? So 1, you got to know what the judges are going to score you on. Align to their language. Put yourself in their shoes. Winston Churchill said, if you want me to speak for an hour, I'm ready now. If you want me to speak for 5 minutes, I'll need an hour. If you're going to just practice this stuff, rehearse it, get every word down, get it short and sharp, that means a lot. Even if you're having coffee with anyone, sharing your story and what problem you're solving, the more you work to explain something clearly to someone else, the clearer it becomes to you. Like I used to find, when I was running around talking to people about funding us, I used to get more excited about the business just because I'm talking about it so much, it actually rubbed off on me. And our strategy became clearer to me because I had to articulate it 20 times. It's actually good for you to do it. Demonstrate the value, know the risk behind your vision. That's that risk thing I just said. So you got to know all these things. 2 is prepare. So, if someone likes the story you're telling and that pitch deck stuff, they're then going to want to have a deeper look. Have that ready, right? Like Georgie said, I want to see hustle. I want to see people who can prove they can hustle, and do they have the next thing ready? Have they got their shit together? So have stuff ready. Have a forecast model with all of your assumptions in there and say, look, this model assumes X, Y, and Z, but don't worry, if X doesn't happen, this is how we'll address it, and this kind of stuff. Make sure all your ownership structure and agreements are in there. You'd be surprised at the wild setups that people have. They've got a great vision, they're passionate, they've got all these other boxes ticked, but then there's no shareholders agreement at all, or someone's got their uncle to invest through his super fund and he's got a third party agreement that gives him a right of refusal on the neck, crazy stuff. Don't do that because it could be the downfall. But if you speak with a lawyer, they'll help you. And make everything easily digested. Prepare it in a structure that the investors are familiar with. You can even ask them, say, what's your favourite pitch deck? What do you want to see in a pitch? What do you want to see in a data room? They'll tell you. The next one's connect. Yeah, this is a good one because you should always be connecting and treat it as micro moments of engagement, because you'll end up finding people that want to buy your product. They'll know someone that you should speak to who solved that problem, and they might invest. So frequent chats and coffees and, hey, can I give you a quick update, or I've got a problem, maybe you can help me. Like, little interactions are good. And try to get a warm introduction. Like, my whole thing here is don't go from 0 to 100. Build the relationships. And if you've got a team, my philosophy is it's better to involve your team in this, and then they feel part of that journey, and they're out there helping you, and you can share with them some problems you're having, and they come up with ideas, and then when you get the capital, they feel a lot more ownership over it, and they feel like it's a we thing, that, not you're secretly having meetings with people and one day 10 million's in the bank. Like, bring your team on the journey. And with advisors, just meet with them and ask for their help, but set clear expectations about what you're looking for from them. And I know, even though advisors can cost money, I recommend you engage with them early, and they'll give you a lot of free advice. With advisors, though, like, there's a lot of advisors that work repeatedly with VC and private equity because they get a lot of volume through that. So there's advisors that are more founder friendly, and there's advisors that get their meal tickets from VCs. So be careful who you buddy up with, because if push comes to shove, you'll see what advice you get. This sounds simple, but a lot of people don't ask, specifically for what they're after. Like, we'll just ask. Ask for what you want and why you want it, when you need it. Be specific. Ask for your preferred structure. Say, listen, our preferred structure is equity-based and we would like it like this. But we're open to discussion. Like, don't come across arrogant, but like, at least have a point of view, and don't be afraid to ask for what you're looking for. Because, all too often, one of my friends, Steve Torso, who runs a Wholesale Investor, he should come and speak here. Quite often people do everything right and they've got these great relationships and people love their business, but there's no real specifics around what exactly do you want and when and how. So, sounds simple. Last one. Yeah, this is a big one. This is what Georgie was talking about with the hustle. I've written it somewhere here, but you need to prove you're not a startup groupie, right? Because there's heaps of events and you can go and hang out, and like, this is one of them, right? But like, but you could just permanently be on a circuit because you get to hear all this good advice, and there's some free food and like all this stuff, and it keeps your dreams alive. Whatever. I'm not saying it's bad, but the real entrepreneurs. Actually, that's a good joke, actually. How do you know if someone's an entrepreneur? Don't worry, they'll tell you. But the real entrepreneurs, they're out there trying to, improve their product, improve their metrics, meet with customers, get feedback. Like, they're out there hustling, right? And you need to, like, I put this in here because you can have all this other stuff done and it all looks good and sounds good, but like, you need to prove you can go the way, right? You've done it. You've faced challenges. You've solved them. You've done the work analysing the risk and doing the attribution back to actions you're going to take. You prove you act in a data-driven way. Prove that you don't just... Because they're about to give you... One of the biggest risks VCs, or not just VCs, investors have, is like, if you haven't been given multiples of millions of dollars before, it's like, how are you going to behave when you get it? And usually just money just makes you more of what you already are. So if you're frivolous, you'll be more frivolous. So prove that you've got this lean mentality where you're validating things and you've got hypotheses and you look for the data, and once the data validates it, then you put more money into it. Like, if you can have that proof, that de-risks a lot of things for people to invest in you. Prove you can be trusted as well. So, character and you know, the way that you respond on time, professionalism, like everything matters, because they're those judges there, like, you know, with the divers, they're judging everything. So, you know, they're probably the most important one is this one. So that's it. And like I said, we've got free software to help you do a lot of that. And also, it's probably not applicable when you're in startup, but we've got free board software for board management, board governance, board meetings, board minutes, all that stuff. So usually after you raise capital, you have to start putting a board together and all of that. And my last comment would be, what was that thing, like they said, ABR, like always be raising? Like, I'll warn you, this is true. I remember reading this quote, that once you raise capital as a CEO, you will spend 30 to 40% of your time on capital raising. And I'm like, nah, that's not right. It is right. So, like, it's like strapping on a backpack with a, you know, you will not be able to run as fast. You will not be able to have as much capacity after you raise capital. You will have that 10 kilos on your back because it'll always draw you back to spending more time, more capital, dealing with investors, and like, it's actually true. So that's why I say avoid it as long as you can. But that's it. But I'll take questions if I've got time. But thanks.
I think we've got
Okay. No. Thanks. Thank you.
I think you're going to get a lot of questions at the end. Absolutely. And don't worry what he said about being startup groupies. You had to come to this to be called that. So now let's get a panel party happening. The Secrets to a Raise, founder lessons on preparing, prospecting and pitching. Cheryl Mack. It's best for these rock stars to introduce themselves because they'll know their best bits. Jethro Cohen and Isabella Rich. Thanks so much, guys.
Well, gang, I think Sam covered most of it off, so let's just go straight to where the bodies are buried. Jethro, sort of out native grasses on Cleveland Street and Surrey Hills.
Yeah, they're in the backyard drowning after all the rain.
Look, I'm going to start with you guys doing your pitch to introduce yourselves. So I've given you an hour to prepare your 30-second version of who, why, where, and what. Cheryl, let's kick off.
Alrighty, excellent. Hey everyone. So I am an angel investor. I run an angel syndicate that allows others to co-invest in the things that I'm investing in. I have founded a company that supports others to run their own angel syndicates and all around champion for startups.
And an amazing person to know. I'm Jethro. Really nice to meet everybody. I'm an investor at Square Peg Capital. We're a fun kind of we can go pretty early, and we can also continue backing founders really late into their journey. Before this, I worked leading operations at a prop tech business called Different. Some of you guys might have heard of it. Some of you hopefully were customers. It'd be great for me if you were. And then before that, spent 4 years launching Uber Eats across ANZ. Really excited to sort of get stuck in today. I love the groupies of the ecosystem. I've been a groupie for a very long time myself. Hopefully, I will be for many, many years to come.
Hi, I'm Isabella. I feel a little bit bad today because there's someone in the audience who is wearing an OIF t-shirt and I am not the one. So that's who we are, OIF Ventures. We are an early stage VC, invest from pre-seed and continuing to back founders throughout their journey. I know, how good's the shirt? Me personally, I've been at OIF for the last 3 years. Prior to that, I was at Boston Consulting Group in the US and Australia, and before that, I had a little social enterprise that I started. Excited to be here tonight. Random fact, my favourite food is melon.
Melon as in rock melon or cantaloupe or honeydew or where we're going?
Honeydew, actually.
Oh, see, know who you're investing with. Right, guys, I'm going to kick this off in a fun way. What's the most fun about the interactions you have with founders as you put together an investment?
Most fun. I mean, I get to talk to founders all day long. It's fantastic. They're super inspiring, sometimes a little bit delusional, but you like that about them. And you get to learn so many new things.
I think it's almost impossible to be a really good founder unless you're a bit delusional, certainly at the start. It's honestly an amazing role. You know, we spend all day meeting people who are much brighter, you know, much more charismatic, who know a lot more about anything than I do. And so really my favorite part is it's kind of like learning from absolute experts in their field. It consistently surprises me what quality founders the Australian ecosystem is producing, and our job is just to spend time getting to know them. There aren't better things to do if you really love the ecosystem and you really love technology.
Echo that. Our philosophy around investment is we back founders and teams, and I don't think there's been a founder that I've met who I know more about exactly what they're building, and so learning about the ins and out of kind of exactly what the business model is and how you kind of execute in markets, my favourite bit.
Now, we've had some fascinating insights in terms of the secrets of a raise. I am just going to start with this one before we sort of drill down a little bit. What was the one thing that, if you could only sort of do the Winston Churchill 5-second version, that you would want a founder to know before they come and talk to you? Izzy?
5-second, what would you like us to know? That you should speak to any founder that we've backed, including and especially the companies that are going okay or haven't worked. And I think you should ask that of every investor. It's very easy for an investor to go and speak to the pin-up, but you have a 7-year to 20-year relationship with your investors, and you want to hear both the good and bad stories. And so implore you to speak to any one of our founders.
100% echo that. I have a slightly different take on the question, which is that, if I was approaching a fund for my first round or second round, what are the things that I see really consistently that I think people miss the mark on? It's that you are the most important part of the business. By a country mile, the founder and the founding team is by far the most important part of the business. So kind of don't shy away from that. I meet a lot of pre-seed, seed founders who kind of kick to the end of the presentation why they're the right people to solve the problem. My number one piece of advice is no. Lean in, tell investors why you are the best person in the world. And the reality is that there might be lots of reasons, some of them previous experience, some of them interest, some of them energy, but just make sure you elevate why you are the right people to solve the problem, because if you're not, unlikely investors are going to get as excited as you are.
100% agree on both of those points, so I'm going to answer a different one. Know why you want to raise money. I keep hearing things like, we're going to raise soon because we want to go on the venture-backed path. It's like, that's great, but like, why do you need the money now? What are you going to do with it? Like, have a good answer to that question before just showing up being like, hey, I want money.
Yeah, I would add to that like, by raising money, you're giving up part of your company. It's like giving up part of your salary per year. And so exactly to that point, raising money is not about raising money. It's about, can I 10x my business or 5x my business or 3x my business through external capital? If not, I'm just giving up part of my business or my salary.
I think one extra piece to that is, the ecosystem has accelerated the sort of cultural zeitgeist and excitement around startups and VC-backed startups. And you see in the news someone raised a squillion-dollar round, and everyone goes, oh my God, that's so cool. I wish that was me. The reality is that you can build an incredible business without ever taking on external funding. You can build an incredible business that's great for you, your family, your kids' kids, your kids' kids' kids, without ever raising a $30, $40 million round. I think sometimes I meet founders who go into it wanting to raise money a little bit for the sake of raising money, when they don't realize sort of the types of business that investors like us look for. And we don't just look for amazing businesses, we look for amazing venture scalable businesses. There are lots of amazing small businesses or non-venture scalable technology businesses. And if that's you, and if that's the way your business is shaping up, don't chase the VC path as sort of a sort of stamp of approval, because it isn't. It's just a tool to enable a certain strategy.
It's the catapult, in that moment. Now, you mentioned this in terms of the founders being central to the experience. So I do want to ask you about the narrative, building the narrative when you're introducing your team to an investment team. How do you think people should approach that?
Yeah, everyone has their own story. Everyone has their own approach. I think the things that we look for are is this an enormously exciting problem? Before we get stuck into the product, the reality is that if you're an early stage business, the only thing that is true is that your product is likely to change a lot. So is it an amazing problem that you're solving with a huge amount of sort of growth trajectory? 2, why is now the right time to solve that problem? Why has no one solved it before? What has enabled this pace of change? And then 3, and this is where I think it's time to start bringing in the team and your experience, what is your unique insight that's let you understand this in a way that no one else has? Now, most often in, I think, really exceptional founders, that's because they have first-hand experience with the problem. Now, that is not always true, but it often is. And so whether that's first-hand experience as a customer who was really pissed off by the experience, or whether it was first-hand experience operating in the industry and seeing the inefficiencies of it, I think the really important thing to do is imbue your story with your personal insight. If there isn't one, and it feels at very arm's length from you and your history and your experience and your team, it's just a little harder to get really excited about the opportunity because we don't have the immediate understanding, wow, this person is passionate about the space. Now, kind of one layer beneath that is that it's not always totally the case and you're sort of exaggerating. That's fine too. Just make sure you're really good at exaggerating it.
I would add to that piece, like, the reason you want that, like, passion is because this is something that you're taking money for, which means that you need to be committed to this thing for the next, like, 5 to 10 years. So I need to know that you're going to be passionate and committed to it. And if you're not, like, personally close to that particular problem, I struggle to see that this is something you're going to stay committed to for that long.
Agree. I could say more things, but yeah, you covered 80-20.
We kind of talked about, earlier on, knowing how much money you want, but I do want to go back to a question that was brought up a little earlier today, and that's the valuation side, because of course we've seen these astonishing valuations, we've seen these extraordinary uplifts. How, in an early stage business, do you guys advise founders think about this? Do we go down the antler and start make model and just say, well, my company's going to be worth 7 figures to begin with from the outset?
3 points on this. Antler and Start made one mechanism to value a company, but I think they offer a lot more than just valuing a company. So I put them to one side because their purpose in life is not just to value a company, it's to build a company. If I was building a company, I would think to myself, what do I need to prove to get me to break even and profitable, or to my next round of capital that I will be able to do in a really accretive or a big value uplift. And then I would say to myself, how much is it going to cost me to get there? And these things are always art and science, but really what you're trying to triangulate is, how do I give up the least amount of my business today? Because the earlier you are, the more amount of your business you're going to have to give up to take capital, because there's less traction. So I would work backwards and say, okay, for a Series A, I need to prove in a marketplace model, I've got buyers and sellers and there's the repeat rate of 30%. What do I need to do to get there? And that's going to cost me $500,000. And then the second point to that is, once you say, okay, I actually know I need $500,000, I think there's a balance between going out and saying I'm worth $20 million versus sitting back and saying, I'm going to people who do this every day. And the people that do this every day, we're not going to back a company. Any VC is not going to back a company if we're taking, 40% of your business on day one, because we know you're going to be diluted to only 20 or 25%. And as Jethro says, we're backing you. So what we need to try and triangulate as investors is, how do we see the value accruing over time and not dilute the founder too much? And so that I would work backwards to say, how much do you know you need? And then allow kind of the market to say, okay, we think this is what, the business is worth at this given time, without diluting the founders too much.
That was a pretty perfect answer.
Well, I do want to follow up on that. I mean, okay, from a practical point of view, you have to have a valuation. Do you think that we place too much emphasis on that aspect of building a business? Because I even think about Sotheby's and the $70 million we paid for an NFT by Beeple, and I'm struggling with the value on that, but someone was prepared to pay it, and that's what markets are. If you're prepared to pay, that's the price. But the valuation thing is a really kind of ethereal thing.
Yeah, I think... no, do you want to go?
No, go.
There are sort of, there are broadly three options here. You slightly undervalue your business, or you undervalue your business, you overvalue your business, or you land somewhere that everyone feels is reasonable. If you undervalue your business, the downside here is that you've diluted more than you should. The hope is that in success, at $1 billion or a $5 or a $10 billion valuation, that difference that you will experience at that point will hopefully be relatively nominal in terms of your wealth accrual. The much riskier thing is when you materially overvalue a business. And I sense that the last 6 months of 2021, there might be some businesses that in 6, 12, 18 months' time are doing down rounds. Down rounds are really hard to get through. They're hard to get through as a founder. They're really hard to get through as a team because teams are motivated by equity, and when they see that equity value deteriorating, that's tough. And so one of the things I try and encourage founders to think about is it's really nice to get on the front page of the AFR with a $100 million valuation on $1 million of revenue. Like, you look amazing. It's not always doing you a service in the long term. Undervaluing is not great because you're giving up wealth, but hopefully in success, it's going to be less risky than a really material $70 million NFT overvaluation. So it's just like, it's really hard to get perfect. It is art and science, but chasing valuation for the sake of valuation is perhaps good in the short term. It's great in the long term in amazing otherworldly success, but that is very hard to come by.
Can I ask a question? While I have the two of you up here. What about founders building in a bit more buffer? Do you recommend that now because of what we've seen in the last couple of years in terms of the amount raised? And then does that also affect the valuation?
It's always going to take longer and cost more to build the business. So always advise founders to raise a little bit more than what they, like, if you go, I'm going to get to $2 million by June 23, I would say, okay, it's going to take you 6 months to raise on top of that once you get to that mark, and you want to do a little bit of buffer. So, yeah.
I think the only thing I'd build on that with is that, especially at the pre-seed and seed stage, really what you are chasing at that point is product market fit. If you can get to product market fit, your product is selling really easily, you have a repeatable model, then the A round, the B round hopefully takes care of itself because investors are taking less of a risk on whether you're actually solving an exciting, meaningful problem for customers. And so at the pre-seed and seed, if you do raise a little bit more, all you're doing is giving yourself extra time to find product market fit, which hopefully then means your A round is all that more exciting and it raises itself and you don't even have to show up to an IC, you just get term sheets over lunch. I think that is possible.
Okay.
Yeah, from Isabella at OIF, and so I just really encourage people to start like, if you can give yourself longer, and it's not going to materially de-risk, it's not going to materially dilute yourself, kind of why not?
I love that you have these shut up and take my money moments, Jethro.
Oh no, it was just about OIF. It wasn't about us. There are lots of people wearing the OIF shirts in the house tonight.
Now, our themes are preparing. So in terms of homework, I mean, Sam went through it quite in great detail. Is there anything that you saw in what he was saying that you think you would add to that?
I think the most important thing is know what you're raising, why you're raising, the problem that you're solving, and how you're going to get to the next stage of the business, because that's really, like, we're investing in you to do that, and all of the other things come on top of that. But if you've got that down packed, you're in really good stead. And like, in terms of materials, there is everything out there. Like, go to SquarePeg and their blog. We don't blog much.
Max Resources. Max Resources.
Max Resources. Go to Andreessen Horowitz. Go to Sequoia. You can find as much as you want in terms of template pitch decks, template templates of really what cap tables, all of those kinds of things. So I don't think from a like tactical perspective it's difficult. It's just being able to tell your story and why you're raising the money.
There's maybe one thing that I would push back on, and I apologize to Sam, I didn't focus on the entire presentation, but there was one thing that I heard at the very end, which was always be raising, and I think he might have meant that in a different context. I probably just want to maybe either push back on that or kind of give slightly different context. When I see founders that are constantly like, hey, we're raising, and it doesn't seem to ever stop, like the round doesn't stop, that's actually, to me, that's kind of a negative signal. So I think if you are raising, set a time frame, raise, close the round, go back to running the business. If you're constantly like, yeah, we're raising a round right now 24/7 or 365, that can be a negative signal, for me at least.
I want to ask about market sizing, because of course we talk about the problem you're solving, and they come across my deck all the time. This is a ultimate squillion sized market, and I've got to be honest, I look at it and go bullshit, but that's what's sold. There's some sort of dream that you can have all the pie and I'm on my way to grabbing it. How do you think about that, and what do investors care about?
I have quite a strong view on this, which is that
Please tell us.
at pre-seed and seed stage, the honest answer, if I'm really honest, is that I very rarely look at the slide. I think that founders put in a lot of work to justify their TAM and their SAM, and they walk through and they describe in very, very specific detail why it seems to almost always be kind of between a $20 and $200 billion industry. Our goal our fund's goal is we need to be able to believe that the business is big enough or the market is big enough so that a business can really thrive. The very specific nuance of how large a market is at the pre-seed and seed stage is often not the most relevant question for us to ask. We absolutely spend time after we meet founders thinking, can this incredibly niche vertical SaaS business that will only apply in Sydney be worth $1 billion? Probably not. But that question is often quite commonsensical, not always, but often quite. And so I often see pre-seed, seed stage founders almost falling in the trap of too quickly spending too much time of the conversation justifying the size of the market. The honest answer is that the investor is going to go and do their own independent research afterwards. They're probably not going to rely all that heavily on the slides that you prepare. So you should indicate how big a problem this is, and perhaps market size is a way of doing it. But I don't spend very much time at all talking to founders who are very early in their journey about market size.
I think for me, I'm more concerned about how painful that problem is, particularly if I'm not close enough to it to recognize it as being painful in my small world of experience. So I would be more concerned, because I invest in that really early pre-seed stage where, I don't want to see a huge market that you're going to tackle right now, because that means that you're going to try to do way too many things at once. So I think for me, it's really around, you need to convince me that problem is really super painful for a particular group of people, and then I'm an optimist, so I can see the path to, if you nail that problem, you can probably figure out the next stage and the next stage that gets to the huge market.
Yeah, we focus on how do you get the first 3 customers. If you can get 3, you probably can get 10, and there's probably 13, and it kind of, we go bottom up.
It's that thing of everyone's got blood and they will bleed. But if you can figure out how to create a Band-Aid you can take off without it hurting like hell, then you've got a pretty great product, regardless of the size of the market. Now, I want to turn to pitching and small things that people can do. We've talked about sort of pitch decks, not pitch decks. Georgie sort of, is a big Notion fan and everything gets loaded into there. What are your tips, tricks in terms of how founders approach that? Do you have to have a pitch deck?
I'll start because I rate the smallest check. I actually really hate to be pitched at. If you get on the call with me and you want to do your 2 to 10, or it usually turns into a 15-minute verbal pitch with slides, I'm doing my work on the side. And most of the time, I just don't let you do that. In fact, every company I've invested in so far has never actually verbally pitched to me with a slide deck. I usually get a slide deck ahead of time that needs to be able to be read on its own. I read that very thoroughly. mostly thoroughly before the call. I meet the founder, I sit down with them, I ask them questions and engage with them and try to get more information out of this person that I might be handing money to. And then we maybe do that once or twice more, and then I write a check. Like, these guys have IC, so that's why you could talk about your processes.
I agree with a lot of that, and some of it isn't relevant to us. I think one thing I 100% agree with is that when somebody starts their pitch and it's a very detailed slide presentation and it feels like they have a rehearsed script, that's when I can't sustain my attention. I just have too short an attention span to find that the most engaging way of telling a story. I believe that founders will always be the best storyteller for their business, and you need to be able to do that conversationally, confidently, comfortably. And sometimes when I find people, like literally you can sort of see eye scanning on Zoom calls reading off a script, that really doesn't resonate with me. I like, similar to you, I like to get a more detailed slideshow ahead of time, and then hopefully, if I have time, read it as in as much detail as I can. But at the same time, there are weeks we're meeting 20, 30 businesses, and it's not always practical to go through it in detail. And so my tip is a little bit more, have different slideshows for different use cases. There might be the more detailed one you send ahead on a cold email or through an introduction in order to kind of whet the appetite of an investor, and then a slightly stripped back one that was just providing sort of format and guidance for the conversation itself. But it should not be a pitch in my mind. It should be a conversation. And sometimes when you see the kind of the hype of the 5-minute or 10-minute pitch competitions, those just don't, maybe this is just me, they really don't resonate for me. I much prefer an open, honest conversation where you're flicking all over the shop, you're asking questions that are interesting to you. And so think about how different formats can help you do that well.
I've got 4 things. Ask the investor up front how he wants to run, or she wants to run the meeting. There's different styles, as you can tell. Number 2, don't start or even end with, this is my valuation, take it or leave it. We kind of triangulate back that the amount that you're raising, you don't want to dilute more than 20%, 25% at most. So we can gather that, but that's also what we do every day. So that would just be one thing. And if an investor asks you, what's your valuation? The most strategic answer is, I'm going to let the market decide. The third thing, even if you have a number in mind, it's like one of those political things. The third thing that I would say is, at any stage of your business, try and get external validation. Whether you're building a deep tech product which isn't it launched, but you have verification in market from 1 or 2 people, or you have 3 customers. I'm going to do a plug here. We recently invested in a company called Vouch, which lets you do video testimonials, and sending video testimonials of Culture Amp saying, yeah, I love this product, is so much better than the founder getting up and saying this product is this solution's real. Because you can see, as an investor, you can see everyone else that is loving the product. And I forgot my 4th, but those...
I have the 4th.
Okay, good.
It might not be yours, but it's mine. I think if I can add one thing to that, I agree with everything you said, especially on the market sizing, on the valuation piece. One that we were talking about this before, do not bring external people to the pitch. That's if you have this is a really strong view of mine. If you have advisors or if you have distantly related kind of board directors, I find the more people on a call, the more awkward that call is. It's harder to get a really open, honest dialogue about the performance of a business. And if you are using external advisories, that's fine. Use them. They can be incredibly valuable. I don't feel they add a lot of value in pitch conversations. And if anything, it's just time away from you telling your story that you know best. And it often just feels a little awkward. And so that's just one thing I see actually increasingly frequently. And sort of across our firm, at least, we've been saying, I don't think it is doing founders a service. There are amazing advisory firms and they provide incredible advice that's often not in the moment of pitching.
The family Labrador jumping up at that time, though, is fine.
Yeah, I actually have a Great Dane, and so she often, her little head in the background, and people go, what the hell's that? But yeah,
look, you kind of touched on it there around the valuations and the advisors. Are there any other red flags? Because that's been a bit of a theme where you sort of go, I think we might stop now.
Actually, I got an email this morning that was you can get a 50 times multiple return on your on your investment. Please don't pitch that to me.
To that same extent, I think that usually goes with in 2025, and like we're investing in. We're not a private equity. We're not private equity people. We're investing for the long term. So if you're getting in and getting out by 2025, it's probably not for us.
And very similar to that, I've had, and I think it's often from, I guess, perhaps founders new to the sort of startup ecosystem is coming in and saying, you know, I want to hit 100 mil val, and then there are going to be so many exit opportunities for us. And when you are saying that to a really large VC investor, that the kind of economics of an investment like that actually often don't make a huge amount of sense for them. And so for us, you know, we want to believe this can be a tremendous generational business. Saying we're going to hit 100 mil val and then sell it's often a red flag for our fund.
I think it would be same for me as well, because a lot of the time I'm helping the companies flip up to VC. I think it's good to know if you want to exit the business, that's fine. Like knowing what the plan is for you at the end of whatever the journey is, whether it's 3, 5, 10, or 100 years, that's okay. But knowing the context of who you're reaching out to, and this kind of goes back to like research, like try to do a bit of research. I know increasingly like it is a full-time job, or it's a lot of work to raise capital, but do a bit of research around who you're reaching out to. I get blanket emails like just, you know, their pitch. And I'm very upfront. Like funds will have it on their websites as well around what they invest in. Like a cursory glance at my LinkedIn would tell you that I don't invest in health or med tech. So like take a look, do a tiny bit of research, and don't do a blanket spray and pray.
On that front, I do want to ask the approach, because, you know, I get about 300 plus emails a day, and I was saying before, one of the ways I deal with that is if it starts with hi there, it's a delete, you know, because it's like, yeah, that was the first indication you haven't done any homework. It's like you don't know who you're talking to. You know, I don't believe that you actually know what I do for a living. So that's a really simple way. But, you know, do we do a LinkedIn reach out? Do you get the email, whether it says, you know, you can make 50x overnight?
I get those emails apparently. Would you like to invest 50x?
It's kind of like the VC version of want longer lasting sex, really. It's just the worst. But, you know, what's the right way to approach this? A cake?
Yes, please.
I don't think it's the medium that's the, like, yes versus no. I think to what Cheryl says, like a little bit of research, you'll be able to find out what we've invested in. If you're an ed tech company, say I see you've invested in Go1 and, you know, really enjoyed the story and of Andrew and the team. It's that kind of one-liner and the cover letter that everyone's kind of written, which is like, you don't say Bain when you're applying to McKinsey, which I did do.
I also did that.
We've all done that.
Yeah.
I will try and be a little bit more prescriptive. I think this is not a hard and fast rule, but the reality is that different ways of reaching out to an investor have different conversion rates. I think if I had to sort of on the spot stat rank them, if you can get a referral from one of those investors' portfolio founders, that's likely going to be the strongest vote of confidence. If a portfolio founder intros me to another founder, I will 100% of the time meet with them. Unless it's very far outside of our mandate, but that often the portfolio business will know what's in our mandate. Following that, sort of an intro from a close contact of the fund, maybe someone who's friends with one of the investors, or perhaps an investor in the fund themselves, an LP in the fund. That is, again, maybe it's not 100% of the time, but it's getting up there. What is often not going to get you a reliable first meeting, which is often the toughest one to actually find yourself in, is kind of cold emailing or applying online through a form. You know, investors will often have forms on their websites. I think different investors check them sort of at different reliability levels.
I think reaching out cold is better than the form.
I think reaching out cold is better than the form, and reaching out cold and a place
With
there.
a little bit of research.
Yeah, with research and making it personal. But if you can get, like everyone talks about warm introductions, you do not need a warm introduction in order to meet an amazing partner investor. It doesn't hurt. And so if you can find someone to introduce you, or if you have a close relationship with an LP or a founder, or perhaps someone who's really friendly with an investor, it makes it much easier.
I think just as Bella's point there, like the research, you're saying it doesn't matter which medium, like that can be email, LinkedIn, Twitter. It's about the content, not necessarily the channel.
We're going to throw it open to you guys, and I hope you don't mind that we do run a little bit over time because we just think there's a fair bit of value in this. But from our end, I want to go your favourite deal. Just paint a picture of how it went. You don't necessarily have to go into the company and all of that. But, you know, was it the Rockpool Mill, the Domain Romani Conti had landed on the table, very large stake, there's the term sheet, away you go.
That has never actually happened.
Take us through your perfect one.
This is going to sound like a cop-out answer.
I was going to do the same.
Well, I was going to say two things. A, it's hard to pick a favourite child. We are very high conviction investors. When we invest in someone, we love them. And as a fund, we love them. And so all of them are favourites. You know, all of my dogs are my favourite dogs, except one is my actual favourite. And I think if I had to... When I think of one very specific founder, he actually did everything that's kind of the opposite of what I've just described. It was a cold introduction. It was not very close to our fund's mandate, but exceptional talent rises to the top, and he was exceptional. He is exceptional. And so despite it being cold, it being a bit of an unusual investment for us, it's still one we made, and it's a business that's doing really well.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to pick a favorite founder or child, but I can just the experience. Yeah, I can talk about the experience. Like I've been running my own little angel syndicates for a while, but I've just launched like the official one, and we did our first deal, and so that one, you know, is my favorite process because I had conviction around a founder. I decided to invest. I wrote up the notes on why I was investing, and somehow 22 other people wanted to come in on that deal with me, and I thought that was pretty freaking cool.
I'll take a different turn and talk about boring process. I was going to say the deal's probably the least important part of what we do. I could tell you about my favorite story of the last 4 years helping the companies and being a part of them. But in terms of actual process, what I would recommend is, number one, have your pitch deck ready before you go out to investors. 2, have all the investor lists, like the people that you want to reach out to before you start going out. Like the third thing is try and align all investors, because if you reach a term sheet for one company, from one investor, and then you go to other investors and say, I've got 24 hours to make a decision, all the other investors are going to say, okay, well, we can't participate in the round. And you want to try and optimize price. So I think it's the best run processes I've seen is where you have the deck ready, you have the data room ready, and you can get if you look up data room for VC online, you can get all of what you need to put in a data room.
I have a checklist if you need one.
Okay, Sherry has a checklist if you need one. And have everyone on the same schedule and be running the process in parallel so that all investors have the capacity to put in a term sheet, because you'll optimize price for yourself.
All right, question.
Thank you, guys. That was awesome. We've made quite a few notes, so that was definitely helpful. One thing I wanted to ask, I assume you get quite a few those cold reaches. What are the things that would spark your attention in those cold reach outs? And have you ever made a deal with people that reach out cold? Thanks.
Yeah, actually, the first investment I worked on at SquarePeg was from a cold email, and actually it was in the AFR. So Mike Smith, who's the founder of ZeroCo, which is a direct-to-consumer got a CPG business, and Mike, he got in touch with us through a cold email. It was personalized, so he sent it to Paul, our founder and one of our partners. It was very specific. He said, in just a number of bullet points, the outrageous success of the business in a very short time period. He said, I know this might be a little bit outside the mandate, but why don't you just meet with me and hear why this is going to be an incredible business? And it was probably less than 200 words. It was engaging, it was personalized, and it very succinctly demonstrated why we should be excited. The opposite of that is when someone sends a generic cold email that says, I'm working on a business in this industry, are you interested in meeting? The answer is often no. And the reason it's no is that we get hundreds of those a week. And so I think it's when it's personalized. I think it's when it demonstrates the most exciting points about your business. And I think it's when it's really short. That's what I've seen work.
Great.
Yeah, same. And I would add to your question, have I ever invested on a cold email? No, but well, not in the time frame that they were expecting investment, but I did invest in the founder. I think it was like a year and a half later, based on the relations that we'd built from that. So not necessarily, but also that can lead to building a relationship with the investor.
That's actually a really useful point, I think, to discuss a little bit more, which is that oftentimes we'll meet someone, we'll pass on the opportunity, and then we go, oh shit, why'd we do that? And then 6, 12, 18, 24 months later, we come back and go, actually, this is a phenomenally exciting business. And so this is an industry, both on our side and on founder sides, where seeds planted today grow into amazing trees in the future. And so I think if it's a not for now from an investor, just make sure you stay in touch.
You must have been pretty astonished too with Mike and the Zero raise, because it came out the same time he did his crowdfunding. So he took an each way bet, but that was a record. That was $5 million in about 6 hours that he raised.
Yeah,
from retail investors.
and actually over that period they kept having to reduce the maximum investment so that more. Mike just had this view he wanted as many people to participate in it as possible, because he's a community builder. He's very excited about getting as many people engaged in the problem as possible. It's a direct-to-consumer business right now selling kind of home care soap products without the use of, with no single-use plastics. And so he really feels that building a movement around this is important. And yeah, they smashed the record for biggest crowd fund ever.
And I can imagine the email, because I get the subsequent emails and they're all just as enthusiastic. And it's like, right, again, shut up and take my money. Yeah. AJ, we've got a question down the back.
It's a positive. There's no, what's the quote? If there's no skin in the game.
Is there an amount that's too much, though?
It's like, that's a conversation of like personal wealth and how you divide your personal wealth. But like, no, if you're, it comes down to your metrics. Like, I'm not investing in you because you've invested $10 million in the business and you have you haven't got product market fit and like no customers and all the rest. So it's a triangulation, but like, yeah.
I agree 80%. I think the only extra thing I'd add is that sometimes we've seen founders who say, I initially invested X amount in the business, and then at the sort of pre-seed, I invested an additional whatever, and then I topped it up myself and I took it as a bridge round or whatever. And when the metrics of the business sort of don't show that they've used that capital incredibly well, sometimes it can just be a general red flag about, hey, you keep putting money into this. That's obviously an enormously important decision for you, but what is there to show for it? And so that's actually not too dissimilar from any other funding question. I love seeing founders with skin in the game. It's going to, it motivates. It's why VC and partners are often good investors, because they have skin in the game too. Obviously, it's not nearly as meaningful, but I would just say when that capital hasn't been used thoughtfully, it feels like an amber flag, because it is so much higher value capital to that founder.
Yeah, I think that articulates exactly. Yeah.
You got another one, AJ?
Yeah, there's one other interesting one. When there's so much talk around needing to solve a problem, the question from Bernard is, does it always have to be about solving a problem? There are things like TikTok and Instagram, which are just cool things to have, but there's no big problem that they're solving. So how do you feel about innovation that takes time for people to adapt to a trend rather than killing the media real social media?
I actually think that's such a good question, because I do pitch coaching, and at least one of the people in the room will always ask that question. And it's not an area I would invest in. It's not an area I understand. So if you can build something that is cool and people love it and it's viral and it's growing like crazy, fantastic. There are absolutely investors who invest in that space. I don't know if we are any of them.
I don't know if I agree with those not solving problems. I think when I think of Instagram, Smartphones are developed to be able to take photos, but there was no way of building communities and there was no way of interacting with your friends and family around photos you'd taken. I think that's a problem. I think it's a problem that captured a zeitgeist, and it's grown to be one of the most successful kind of social media networks ever.
What about TikTok? What problem does that solve?
I have a shit ton of dead time on my phone. Everyone's addicted to their phone.
I don't know about that. I think it's like disruptive technologies, let's call it Uber, that started as a black car that no one thought was black. I think that's the nature of, no one knew they needed an NFT. And to be honest, I think there's huge amounts of utility that will be bought. But I think it's the person who's asked the question is there's a range of, you need to tell the story of why this is going to be disruptive, which is, I think, kind of extension to a problem.
And sorry, to be clear, I do not mean to say that every successful business has solved a really large problem. I do think TikTok and Instagram have. I think on TikTok it's on the creator side as well. There was very few ways for high quality creators to directly monetize their work, and TikTok allows for that. I think that people struggle to find relative content for them on the internet. TikTok's algorithm helps them do that. So I think those are not the best examples, but I do think people have built amazing businesses without solving a problem that people understood at the point they raised their seed round.
I think they're also still evolving, and I go back to that old Steve Jobs thing of we give people things they don't know they need yet. Yeah. I think it is still coming. We're finding ways. The creator economy thing is still happening big time and emerging in a bunch of different ways, and NFTs are an example of that. Still don't know, still don't quite get it, but we'll see how it pans out. One more question, because I think the other problem we need to solve is wine and food, and we're going to do that in just a minute. All right, last one.
Thanks for the last question. So it seems that the general consensus is that having a founding team or a co-founder is beneficial. So as a sole founder, would it be beneficial to found with someone who has complementary skill, albeit both be non-technical? Like, how important is it to have a technical co-founder in this space, considering how hard it is to find one?
Depends what you're doing.
Yeah, that's great.
To ZeroCo, and I've seen a number of consumer businesses which are built on Shopify and doing $10 million of revenue on month 6. You don't need a technical co-founder for that. If you are saying that you are doing ML, deep learning for EdTech, and you don't have a technical co-founder, you're using an agency, to me that's a large dependency that is going to have to be solved for.
Can I just throw something in there? What about Afterpay, let's say?
Afterpay had the skill set of, the critical point of Afterpay and any of kind of these fintechs is actually the debt, number one, and they had Anthony Eisen for that. And so on a technical front, they built that in. But if I was raising money for a fintech, and we were talking about this just before, the first question I ask is, who's doing the debt facility? What's the rate? What the warranties the warrants they're taking? And that's kind of step one. So yeah, it goes back to I think there's fintechs that are in the middle.
And I think it's a little bit like, what do customers, what's the most important piece of value you can provide to customers? We just let around in Own Home. Those guys aren't technical. They're not sitting coding applications in the background, but they know an awful lot about debt facilities. And so the part of the product that is most valuable to a consumer is accessing the capital. They are some of the best people in Australia to do that. And so they might not be, themselves, although they've done an awful lot of kind of development. I don't think having a single founder or a non-technical founding team is necessarily a problem, but it can be a big question mark depending on the nature of the business.
I think the great thing about those answers too is it's a reminder that the fundamentals of business, no matter where you are in what space, remain the same. And something as simple as debt is one of those ones that you have to be very careful to address.
Absolutely.
Guys, please put your hands together for this amazing panel. Hope you enjoyed it. To Cheryl, to Jethro, to Isabella, thank you so much.
Amazing. We went deliciously over time. There was just too much good stuff. No, it was ace. It was really brilliant. And I said yesterday that it wasn't going to look the same tonight as it did yesterday, and it absolutely didn't. There was really different characters across the night, super energetic panel, the Jack Nicholson of startups, wherever he's gone, he's smoked bombed, and Georgia at the start. We're going to bring it home with Sunil. Yesterday, someone from Microsoft gave away $50. cold hard cash. Sunil's going to talk about giving away $150,000 US through our program in a quick elevator pitch. So just hear what we've got to give, and then there's a ton of food and wine, and you'll have to find out next door. But I'm handing over to Sunil from Microsoft for Startups.
Hi everyone, I know I'm standing between you and alcohol and food, so I'll keep this really quick. I know most of you are probably thinking, Microsoft startups, what the hell? Like we build nothing on Microsoft, so why are they here? We're cognizant of that, and we've actually built a platform to address just that. It's called Founders Hub, and that's why we are really integrating into the community again. If you have an idea or are just building your prototype, come and talk to us. As Kathy said, we are giving away up to $350,000 US actually, access to our products and services, including $150,000 of Azure, along with access to a mentor network of 100 technical people, capital funders, as well as events like this, etc. So please come and talk to us. We'll be outside while you're drinking and eating food, and I won't take any more of your time. Thank you.
Thanks. That's a pitch. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. There's another couple of events coming up in the same sort of series. Just keep your finger on the pulse, because these are totally worth coming to, and we love having you. Thanks for coming.